I just realized this real estate thing is working, but the exact strategy I'm employing doesn't allow me to insulate myself from these economic changes and shifts. So I had to change my strategy.
All right, I'm Jason Hole, the founder and CEO of DoorGrow, the world's leading and most comprehensive coaching and consulting firm for long-term residential property management entrepreneurs. And for over a decade and a half, we have brought innovative strategies and optimization to the property management industry. At DoorGrow, we are on a mission to transform property management business owners and their businesses. We want to transform the industry, eliminate the BS, build awareness, change perception, expand the market, and help the best property management entrepreneurs win. Now, let's get into the show. So my guest today, I'm hanging out here with John Casmon, a multifamily syndicator, host of the Multifamily Insights podcast, and the co-creator of the Midwest Real Estate Networking Summit. And in today's episode, John's going to break down how corporate professionals can transition into multifamily investing, how to find the best markets, how to raise capital effectively, and what separates successful operators from everyone else. John, welcome to the DoorGrow Show.
Yeah, Jason, thank you for having me. Really excited to be here. Love the intro, your intro, not my intro, but excited to be here and share as much as we can on our journey to help all of your listeners reach their goals.
Cool. So John, it's great to have you. I would love for people to hear about your entrepreneurial journey. How did you get to where you are now? And then we can get into your business.
Well, the short answer is bankruptcy, right? I worked for a couple of different companies that went through bankruptcy, and that really made me consider my other options. You know, I was at General Motors back in 2007, 2008, 2009 when we went through bankruptcy, and I was there and I watched what that did to a lot of my peers. I remember one day in particular when we were going to have so it made me really start to think about plan B. Eventually I moved to Chicago, realized real estate was going to be that path, and learned everything I could about investing. So it kind of took me down that pathway to say, you know what, I need a plan B, because no matter what you do when you work in corporate America, you do not control your future. You know, there's politics, there's policy, there's a lot of different things involved that you do not control. And sometimes it does just come down to someone not liking you for whatever reason, or they think you're a threat. And I didn't want to spend the rest of my career navigating those issues. So I figured I had to take more into my own hands.
Got it. And so you started taking things in your own hands. And what was the result?
Yeah, so we landed on multifamily investing, started with small multifamily. My first investment was a 2-unit building. We house hacked it, which is a common popular phrase now, but back then it wasn't quite as common. We lived upstairs. We rented out the first floor unit. And it worked great. You know, it worked so great that we went to refinance, and we had created enough equity in that first investment to pull out a 6-figure line of credit and go out and buy another property. So that really got the ball rolling. We bought a 3-unit building, we bought an 8-unit building. And at this time, I'm still working in advertising, still working in corporate America. And I enjoyed what I was doing. And I had just had my second child, but the agency I was working for also went through bankruptcy right at this time. We had expanded, we were growing, and we had, you know, kind of combined with a few other agencies and kind of became this little conglomerate. And it just eroded just as quickly as it grew. And I remember, again, just sitting there, and now I've got some real estate. Got a little bit of cash flow, but not enough to pay all my bills, new baby. And I just realized this real estate thing is working, but the exact strategy I'm employing doesn't allow me to insulate myself from these economic changes and shifts. So I had to change my strategy, and that led me to syndication. Since then, we've acquired over $150 million worth of apartments. We've partnered with busy professionals to buy these properties and give them some passive income. And that's what we've been doing ever since.
Got it. So your area of genius really is helping these people that were similar to you. They're in the corporate environment, transition into being an investor in real estate.
Yeah, exactly. And I would say too, it doesn't have to be you're going to quit your job and do this full time. And in fact, most people don't, you know, but most people do want a little bit more control over their life. You want a little bit more flexibility. You want to earn and start building up, you know, your net worth. You want to have a little bit more liquidity. And you have to look at your investments to say, what should you be? So what else could you do? Certainly you can invest in the stock market. Lots of folks do that. But real estate is a proven vehicle. The challenge is, I don't know anyone who really wants to be a landlord, right? Certainly you want the benefits of real estate investing, but very few of us want to get those 2 a.m. phone calls. So the shortcut there is, hire a property manager. Great solution. But now you have to be able to manage property managers, right? Which is its whole other business. And if you don't have enough scale, then it's hard to get that person really focused on your business. So we offer an alternative, right? You get all the benefits of real estate investing, all the ownership perks without any of the headaches of being the landlord yourself. So it really
Okay.
is a great marriage of being in real estate without having to do the heavy lifting yourself.
Okay. So the target audience of the show are property managers. So if they're not going to use property managers, then what's the alternative? How does this work?
Well, first of all, what we do is not always for that individual. So I think that's the key, right? You've got to understand who you are from a psychological standpoint. So when it comes to investors, there's two types of investors. One wants control, right?
Yeah.
They're not willing to be passive. And some people think they want to be passive until they're in a passive situation and then they're calling and they want to know why you did this and why you did that and did you that. That's not a passive investor. And that's fine.
Yeah.
And if that's you, you should be active, right? And you should work with a property manager. But you also want to work with a property manager who is going to be right for you, right? Because sometimes that is not how they operate. So you want to understand that. And that's a process to understand who you are as an investor, what kind of investment strategy fits you, and what's going to be right there. When it comes to property managers, though, I think there are a couple of things. And as a matter of fact, we just left at a meeting with a property management company yesterday. They have 2,000 units. We talked about some other services that we offer. And one of the things that stood out to me was just understanding some of the challenges that property managers face. And one of them is property managers are really in a position to think like everyone. They're supposed to think like an investor. They're supposed to understand maintenance and kind of the construction arm enough to understand what needs to happen at a property. But they are really little CEOs, right? Because for our stuff, the larger apartment stuff, those are typically $1 million annual revenue businesses. And this person is in charge of that asset, of that business. They are making the day-to-day decisions. They are the face for the residents, AKA the customers of that business. They are the face, and their experience with that individual is how they view that business. So it really is an important role. And if you are working with property managers, it's really important to understand how to find the right people to connect with them and have them represent your business, your brand, your company in the right light. The other type is those who don't want control and they trust someone else to handle that. And for them, there are a couple of different ways of investing. One is investing passively with a group like ours. The other is turnkey investing, where again, you hire a property manager, but you really entrust them to manage the property. The only thing I would say for either one of those groups, myself included, is you want to trust but verify, okay? You've got to do a lot of your due diligence up front. You want to understand how they operate. You want to talk to some of their other clients, some of their other investors, because you need to get a really good sense of what to expect. And a lot of people are great at selling themselves up front, right? I can tell you everything you want to hear up front. You want to know, what is it like once you sign the paperwork? How often are we going to talk? How frequently am I going to get updates? And at what point am I able to weigh in and make decisions? Because if you are someone who wants to be more active or be heard, or you've got thoughts and opinions, you want to make sure you have a voice in your investment. Otherwise, you may get really disappointed, or you may bring on someone who has a different perspective of what that relationship looks like, and that never is going to work out.
Yeah, there's a big challenge in the industry, and that's that most property management companies suck. And so most investors that have dealt with property management to some degree they have some scar tissue. They've been burned a little bit. A lot of property managers that started their businesses, that come to me for help to grow their business, they started because they were an investor and they couldn't find anyone else to manage the property good enough. And that's why they started their business. But it can be a difficult business to run. And so none of them start their business saying, I want to suck. But that's kind of the default, unless they get some really good support or figure some things out through a lot of trial and error. And so that's where DoorGrow comes in. We help them with that. But one of the things I coach my clients on a lot is that they need to shift into being daddy over these rental properties. They need to tell the owner, hey, you need to trust me. And they need to be able to have a really effective business so that they can lean into that trust. Because a lot of people are anxious. They'll come to them with concerns. But generally, if a property manager is good, they're much better at this investing stuff than most investors. And they're much better at coordinating maintenance. They're much better at handling leasing. And so when an owner tries to micromanage a property manager, it kind of doesn't make sense to hire somebody to manage your asset just so you can manage them to do the job. And so I think the secret is finding a really good property manager that you can let go of control because you can trust them. But yes, you need to verify that they can do the job that you need them to do. And so a good property manager will take ownership of it and they'll take control, and they'll display a lot of certainty and confidence in how they communicate, and they won't allow you to micromanage them, is what I've seen. So
yeah, Jason, and I'll add too. There's a two-way street there, and I think it's easy for people to say, "Oh, most property managers suck, or they're not good, or whatever." And listen, there's certainly a lot of challenges there. A lot of folks who are not living up to par to the standards. But I will go back to this. We ask property managers to do the work of genuinely like a CEO, right? I mean, again, they're managing $1 million businesses in many cases, yet they don't have that training. They don't have that experience. They don't have the ability to navigate all of these various things. So part of what owners and investors need to also understand is that you play the role of asset manager. And that means giving clear direction of what success looks like so that that property manager has a framework to make decisions. It's not to micromanage those decisions, but to help them understand how their decisions impact the greater good. And part of that is like, again, just sitting down with annual goals. What are our revenue goals? What are our goals on occupancy? What are our goals on NOI? And this may seem simple, but I promise you, a lot of folks don't do this. And if you don't do that, then that property manager is going to default to, for instance, I'll give you a great example. I've got a property manager. She's awesome, rock star, but she always gets nervous when occupancy is not at like 96 or 97% at this property. So she is, she starts apologizing profusely and, oh, I did this and I've done that. I'm like, occupancy is one of our KPIs for sure. It's important, but that is not the KPI. I am focused on my net operating income. And if we're going to push rents, the impact of that is you're going to have higher vacancy. And she is not comfortable with that. And that's probably because she's used to working with owners who want that thing fully rented. And they are comfortable having 100% occupancy if they're leaving $50, $75, whatever it is of rent on the table. And that's the part where you've got to really align with your vision versus their vision, because what they have in the back of their mind may not completely align with what you have, or they have residents in their face who are coming into the office. They want something fixed. They want it done quickly. They want it done right. They want it done yesterday. So they've got that pressure of this person in their face. So they may go out there and spend the money or authorize the money to get spent. And maybe they're not picking the most cost-effective measure. So you have that. And I'll give you one third one. A lot of times when you run into the flip side of that is maybe occupancy is low. They say, hey, we need to increase our marketing spend, right? We got to increase our marketing budget. Occupancy is down to 88 or 90%. We got to spend more money. And we're not necessarily really zeroing in on what the specific issue or challenge is at that property. So for an owner, your job as an asset manager is to partner with them and to help them see what the options are, help them work through what some of those challenges and solutions are, and partner with them to find success. It's not to micromanage them and tell them what to do, but it's really to understand the situation better and give them that perspective.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think, one of the things I've seen is that I've noticed a lot of property managers, they make the mistake of thinking that the goal or the product that people want to buy from them is property management. But investors don't wake up in the morning and go, man, I'm so excited to get property management today. The thing that they want, and so the way I describe it to them is I say property management is like the flight to Hawaii. It's not Hawaii. And you're trying to sell the flight. That's not the exciting part. You need to figure out what the investor wants, what their goal is. Where do they want to go? What's Hawaii for them, right? What's paradise? And then how do we optimize for that? And how do we help them create a path for that? Because the actual product that a property manager is selling is not what they do. It's not property management. The actual product is them. It's them and their values and their belief system and how they create trust and the team they build and the system and mechanism they build around them. That's the actual product the property manager is selling. And so a lot of property managers make that mistake. They sit there and talk to you about maintenance coordination and leasing and inspections. And meanwhile, you're just wondering as an investor, can I even trust this person? Like, do our values align? Yeah. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but
I think you're spot on, right? Because ultimately, as an investor, you are only as good as the team you can build. And that property manager is in charge of the day-to-day aspects of the business. And especially when I've heard horror stories of folks who have done like turnkey investing, right? Where property manager, someone owns it, they buy it, they fix it up, and then they rent it back to an investor. And I've heard horror stories where that property was not being well managed. And that's the fear. If you're not in that market and you can't come and see it, so if you got an out of town investor, you really are trusting that property manager. So that is the most important thing, right?
Yeah.
Everything else are tactical, daily, situational things that can change. But it comes down to, do I have the right people that I can trust, people who are going to make the right decision based on the information they have? Because they may not know what I know, or maybe something
Mhm.
shifted and changed where they would have made a different decision. We can't, ache on that. It really comes down to, are they doing their best? Are they making good decisions? If they're not making good decisions, is it because they didn't have the correct information, which again could fall back on you as the investor to say, hey, are they aware of what your goals are? Are they aware of maybe this situation or these tools, these resources, whatever it is? And that's on you to sit and collaborate. But trust is absolutely paramount, because at the end of the day, the thing that I think most of us are concerned with is who we partner with. And there's a great book
Absolutely.
I'm reading right now, and it gets into decision making and the fear of decision making for most of us, and why deals stall. Why didn't you hire somebody? Why didn't you, go with the vendor, or go with the contract, go with the company? And the biggest thing is, we are scared of making the wrong choice. All of us.
Yeah.
Indecision and no action is better than the wrong action for many people, because
Right. Yeah.
once they take action, well, now they're blaming themselves because you didn't pick the right person. Why'd you hire that guy? You should have, like, now this starts to go on in their head versus doing nothing. Well, at least it's not going to get worse, even though it will in a lot of cases get worse. So for a lot of people, that is the scariest thing. So if you can take that fear off the table, as far as being the right person or being someone who's trustworthy, everything else gets easier. So if you can do that, that's the best thing you can do as an investor or as a property manager.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the things that I talk about a lot is that clarity has to come before action. Because if you don't have clarity and you start taking a bunch of action, doing stuff, every
Yeah.
action you take is a little bit wrong. Sometimes it's a lot
Yeah.
wrong. And so, yeah, we need to get that clarity first before we start, making moves. And you talked about, like, I love the example of your property manager that is trying to optimize maybe for the wrong thing. They're like, I want to optimize to making sure their vacancy is super low, but that might not be the goal. That's not the primary goal. The goal is money, And there's a really good book. It's by Elihu Goldratt. It's a good book for operations people, but it's called The Goal. And spoiler alert, the guy's trying to figure out the goal through this whole book, this story, and it's money. That's the secret. The goal of the business. It should be making money. And what happens in this book is that people are over optimizing individual pieces in this flow at this warehouse, and it's actually not helping to make money. It's causing more constraint. And so if we over optimize at one stage, it actually creates waste, bloat, inventory, additional work for the next stage. And so sometimes the best thing certain departments can do is slow down and do less in order to get the outcome, to maximize the outcome. And there's some really great examples in that I think are really powerful. But I think if you're optimizing for the wrong thing, then you're not making it effective. So you want to make sure you're optimizing for the right thing. Otherwise, chaos ensues. You get mad at somebody, but nobody understood what the goal was. And so I think, getting an agreed upon set of criteria of what the outcome is, and asking the property manager, can you help me achieve this? They know if they know what the problem is, usually they know how to help you get whatever goal that you have. And they know whether your goal is probably realistic or not, because they've probably a lot of people do this similarly. And so, but I think it's very important. Make sure you know where's Hawaii, and maybe property management is the vehicle. Now, you had mentioned, like, I'm really curious about this idea of maybe creating syndications. Some property managers are now starting to think, hey, maybe I should create a syndication. What's your criteria for what's a good syndication, and what are some of the? I'd be really curious to get into, if some of the property managers listening were wanting to do kind of a little bit of what you do, how they might be able to get started in that. Like, what are the beginning steps to make sure they don't make the mistakes you probably already figured out in the beginning?
Well, I think the first thing is, do you really want to get into it, right?
Yeah.
Because for a lot of people, you got to understand it's a different business. Now you're not talking about real estate investing. You're not talking about property management. You're really talking more about, investment management. You're
Right.
talking about
Returns.
bringing on private investors who are looking for a return. That is communication skills. That's building up a network and a database of prospective investors. It's understanding the return projections that they're looking for. And it's really kind of managing the investor expectations, not necessarily the investment. But again, that is separate from the investment, right? Happy to manage the investor expectations and concerns, but that was an up and down investment where we had a moment where we actually had to put some of our general partner capital into the deal to keep it going. We had floating rate debt. We had to refinance out of that, and we had to kind of rush to do that before rates started to go crazy. We had moments where our construction, our renovation costs were much higher than we anticipated. So there are a lot of things that we had to navigate. And I think what happens for a lot of operators, a lot of people who get into syndication, they know the real estate and want to do the real estate, but they do not
Mhm.
understand the perspective of the investor. And when
Mm.
you don't communicate to investors on a frequent basis in a clear, transparent nature,
Yeah.
they fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
And the first concern every investor has, and they won't say it, most of the time they don't say it, but I promise you they're thinking it. After they make that investment, oh my gosh, did I make a mistake? Am I going to
Yeah.
lose money? Is this person going to run off? Is this going to be
Mm.
some sort of fraudulent thing? Is this deal going to fail? These are all we're wired like that. This is caveman
Right.
stuff, right? We're wired to protect ourselves. And when you make an investment, and by the way, our investments are typically $50,000 and up, right? So these
Yeah.
are not small investments. So when
Right.
you make that investment, people start to second guess that decision. So my job
Right.
when it comes to this side of the business is to keep them, grounded that, hey, you've done your research, you've made an informed decision, you've picked a
Mm.
good partner. We've done this before. And it's really to make sure that they feel comfortable with that decision. It has nothing to do with the investment, right? The
Yeah.
investment itself, we got to go out there and execute. But that investor psyche is a completely different game. So first thing I would tell any of your property managers when they get into this business is understand, do you actually like people? Do you want to manage investors? Are you comfortable managing people's money? And then beyond that, you have to do it the legal way. There are a
Yeah.
lot of regulations around accepting capital from other people. So you can do it as a joint venture. The more common way of doing it, the more accepted way of doing this is by doing a formal syndication, which requires you to file SEC documentations. There's Regulation D, Regulation A, and there's some couple others, but typically it's going to be 506B or 506C filing, which basically
Mhm.
is the structure that allows you to offer a passive investment opportunity or a security to investors. So again, for some
Yeah.
people, it's overwhelming and they're like, nope, never mind. But for
Right.
some people, they love it. They want to get into it and they can learn more about that process.
Got it. Yeah. I think I love your idea that it's more about managing expectations rather than the investments. And I think that's good advice for all the property managers listening. This is something we spend a lot of time coaching clients on because they think their job is to manage properties. But really, if they're not strong in managing expectations and managing the relationship, it's 10 times to 100 times harder to manage the properties. Their operational costs go through the roof because owners are getting anxious. They're asking more questions. They're getting all these interruptions and calls, tenants, owners constantly. And if they had just managed the relationship and expectations and set strong boundaries at the outset, everybody would feel calmer. And I think really for business owners, I think the thing that really stood out to me that I've been focused on, and I've done some personal coaching in this, is just nervous system regulation.
Yeah.
And John, you seem like you're pretty chill and pretty calm, and I'm sure the
Yeah.
investors feel safe with you, which is why you've had success. If you are a person that is anxious and you're running around like a chicken with your head cut off, you're going to struggle in leading anybody.
Yeah.
Especially in relationships to your spouse and like everybody else. And so having a calm, regulated nervous system allows your investors to entrain to your nervous system and to feel safer and to calm down. And that's not something you can pretend or you can just fake. You have to be that, and they can sense and they can feel that. It'll come across in your tone and in your body language and how you communicate. But if you can make sure that you're in that space and that you're able to regulate your own system, you're able to stay calm when other people are coming at you and other people are angry and other people are emotionally heightened, and you recognize this isn't really you, it's just that's them, and you can maintain that calm, you will be able to create a lot more safety. And that's really what people want to buy. Most people out there, their primary basic need is safety and security. Most people. That's why they aren't entrepreneurs. That's why they don't go start jobs. That's why they aren't like you and me. And if you're a property management business owner listening to this, most people are not like you. They want safety and security. That's why they get a property manager. They want peace of mind. And I'm sure investors in a syndication, they also want some peace of mind because this is a big chunk of change.
They do. And I would say too, most of the property managers I come across thrive in chaos, right?
Yeah.
They're used to stuff getting thrown at them, right? And when you
Yeah.
talk to them and get to know them, you learn very quickly they like it. They do. They like the fact that they don't know what the day is going to bring. It could be
They like the variety and unique challenge that
yeah.
property management brings, for
Could
sure.
be a tenant coming with some crazy issue. It could be
Boring.
it's never boring and they thrive in it. However, what
Yeah.
happens, and if they're going to look to work with investors and particularly raise capital and kind of do their own syndications, they have to understand that while they may thrive in chaos and uncertainty, most other people want organization. You
Yeah.
want everything you said right. You want to have the calmness. You are looking for a captain to steer the ship.
Yeah.
And for that part of the personality, they're going to have to tap into a different side of it to demonstrate how they handle chaos, not that they are chaotic. And I think what happens a lot of times when you're working with property managers is that they don't project that level of control.
Yeah.
It just feels like they're reacting. So part of it is that, and the really, really good ones, the ones who make it to that next level, who are the regional managers and, get those promotions. Well, that's what they do. They manage the chaos and they manage up. They do a great job of telling the owners, the leadership, whoever they need to talk to. They're telling them, hey, here's our process. Here's how we're managing the situation. Here's what's going on. Here's what we're looking into. Hey, we had a water main burst here. We called 3 companies. We got 3 quotes, but it's calm, right? It could be the worst. I'll give you a real example, right? I had a fire at one of my properties and I was going to meet a property manager and I just happened to have a meeting with her that day at the property. She called me. I was literally about to get in the car. She called me and said, hey, I just want to let you know we've got a fire going on at the property. I'm not sure if you still want to meet. You're happy to come. We already have, the fire department's here. They're putting the fire out right now. We already have another company that's coming in. They're going to walk through the damages once this is kind of settled. And I've already talked to the residents. Residents are good. We've got them hotels for the evening. We've checked with insurance. This is covered in your policy. So they're good to go. So you're happy to come down and talk and all of that if you want to, or we can let things settle down and maybe we can meet next week. This is a fire, right? This is like a scary situation.
A literal fire. Yeah.
She
there's
called
plenty
me.
Of fires in managing properties. Yeah.
Her
literal
calmness.
Yeah.
She was so calm. Not only was she calm, she had handled 90% of it, right? Of the stuff you can handle in a moment. She handled it. So I was like, hey, I don't think it makes sense for me to come because I'm probably just going to add more anxiety to the situation at this point, right? It seems like you've got it under control.
Yeah.
Why don't we let things settle, literally let the dust settle. And then once it's there, I'll come down. We can assess the damages, figure out what else needs to happen, what other next steps need to take place, right? But had it handled like a rock star.
Yeah, I love that.
Now, a lot of other folks would have saw the flames, called immediately. Oh my God, there's a fire.
Yeah.
Oh my God, what are we going to do?
Freaking
right?
out.
Like, so now you freaking out. Everyone's freaking out. No one's controlling the situation, right? So now everyone's mind is just spinning and going. So it does really take, kind of going back to where we started the conversation, that mindset of someone who is the boss, who is leading, who is going to take charge, even though it's not their property, they're going to take charge. Here's what needs to happen next. Maybe you have an emergency response plan already put in place, but you have these things already scheduled and ready to go. So when they happen, you're not shocked. You're not surprised. You're not asking questions that maybe you should have figured out up front. And that's what a great property manager does. And if you convey that to owners, you're going to stand out above and beyond your competition because most people cannot convey that level of control, the level of planning, and the level of expertise that it takes to truly and effectively manage properties from the front, being proactive as opposed to just reacting to whatever the issue of the day is.
Got it. Okay. So I'm reading, I just read, well, I didn't just read. I read in the past a really great book called Extreme Ownership.
Yeah.
Really good
I got
book.
it like right here. It is right there.
Phenomenal book. I'm going through their newer book, which I think is even better, called The Dichotomy of Leadership. And leadership is what we're talking about right now, is that creates a huge impact. And there's a lot of misunderstandings of what leadership is, like it's control or it's being aggressive, but yeah, it's really that calm presence of letting people know I've got it. Like we can take care of this. We've got a plan, and staying regulated and calm. So I love that. So another question I have is, how can the property managers listen to this? How could they maybe target or partner with, if possible, syndications like you, like people that are doing what you're doing? Is there a chance that they could be a resource, or do most syndications just in-house and they are a property management business?
No. Most that I know work with third-party manager companies. So I would say first and foremost, and syndications, I mean, it sounds like a big, huge, fancy word, but I mean, honestly, anytime you're working with passive investors, it's technically a syndication. So
Yeah.
it really comes down to figuring out who is looking for third party management, and whether or not it's technically a syndication or not is really
Hmm.
irrelevant. You want someone who is going to be managing or owning the property. They want third party, but you have to understand their plan, going back to understanding the goals, right?
Yeah.
Most syndications are looking to sell in a 3 to 7 year time frame, typically 5 to 7 years. Most buy and hold owners have not decided or have not identified their exit strategy. So that's
Right.
probably the biggest difference is when you have, let's just call it an individual investor, or maybe it's a family or whatever that's buying and they want a third party manager. They don't know the exit. They haven't predetermined that they're going to sell in 5 years. So they're buying and holding it. And that goes back to I think the separation of understanding the objective, because for that person, having a full property is great. It means they're maximizing the revenue potential today. When you are syndicating, most syndicators already assume 5% vacancy. That's in
Mm.
everyone's underwriting. So you being at 100, they won't even give you credit. Banks don't even give you credit for it. So
Yeah.
all of these things are already assumed. So for us to be above that is actually a miss, because it means we're not being as aggressive on the rent. So just understanding the mindset of a syndicator, which is they are looking to sell. Typically, they're looking
Hmm.
to double their money over a 5 or 6 year period. So how
Okay.
can you create value? And that's something most property managers don't fully understand, but I would sit and I would talk to that syndicator. And if you want to be a syndicator or partner, so not just be a third party vendor, but you actually want to partner, which we have seen a lot of folks look to do, you want to figure out how you can bring value to the table, because now we are aligning your interest with that syndicator's interest. And now you've got a great partnership, because every
Mm.
syndicator is going to need property management and they're going to need construction management to drive value. So if they can bring those people in as partners, that's a great opportunity for you. And if you're a property manager, you may have phenomenal relationships. You may
Yeah.
already have contractor or other vendor partners that you trust in that marketplace. And if you could then take that and get a slice of the equity, that makes you very valuable for both sides.
Do syndications, do they also need investors and capital, or do most of them have
Absolutely.
that?
Yeah.
Are they really good
Yeah.
at? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, syndication at its core, it really just comes down to the need of capital. If
Yeah.
someone had the capital themselves, they would probably just buy it directly and not go through the process of syndication. Because the syndication is literally just raising the money from passive investors.
Yeah.
And in that scenario, again, being able to manage the communication, that's really what a syndication truly is.
So a really good property management partner could bring property management, some of the construction elements, and investors and capital to the table. Could be a
That
nice
would
little
be
match.
amazing. I'll be honest, man. That's because I don't want your listeners sitting here like, oh, well, I don't have one of those. I don't know if I've ever met one that had all of those.
Okay.
If you do have all of them, yes, you should consider syndicating yourself, because you got all the pieces to the puzzle. Typically,
Okay.
what happens is a property manager has the property management skill. I'll give you a great example. I got a 54 unit down in North Carolina. Okay.
Mhm.
So I came in as a key principal. I've got one of my coaching clients. It's his property that he found. He asked me to come help him with the loan, which I did. One of the partners is the property manager. So that's kind of their role to the table, is they're managing the property. That's
Mhm.
what they kind of came on. They had a couple relationships, but their main role is the asset and property management
Yeah.
side of it. So that's a great way to come to the table. But just like anything else in business, it's very hard to find someone who checks every single box. I mean, that's like
Yeah.
finding the marketer who's a CMO, who's also the CFO, who's also the COO, who's also the chief of human resource. Like, very, like, people don't really have like top notch, excellent skills at every single one of those, right? Like, you might be great
Yeah.
at business, great at sales, great at marketing. You're probably terrible at finance, right? Like, you just forget to do your expense report type person, right? So it's hard to
Mhm.
find someone who checks all of those boxes. And I think typically when it comes to property management, you want someone who's great with people, can resolve issues, but
Mhm.
also has to be somewhat, sufficient when it comes to the numbers, tracking all the data, tracking all the rent roll, the leases, the income and expense statements, things like that. So usually they're not going to do every single box. But again, if you can find someone, or that's where partnerships make sense, if
Mhm.
you've got that, awesome. And again, I'm not saying a company doesn't have that. I'm just saying a single individual doesn't, which is why it's great to partner. If you can find someone who maybe brings a set of skills that you don't have, whether they're joining you in your property management business or they're partnering up where you're bringing your property management skills to the table with their investing or their networking skills, that makes for a good partnership.
Yeah, I got it. Well, we've got several clients, all over the US that are really good at property management. They're really good at handling the maintenance stuff. And they obviously have a pool of investors as clients. And they know that they can't do everything. So we coach them in making sure that they do time studies. They figure out what their purpose is.
Yeah.
We start to align them towards more fulfillment, more freedom, more contribution, and more support in their business. And they start to build the right team. So they're getting operators, they're getting BDMs, they're getting the things they're not like strong in. And so we just make healthier businesses. So for those of maybe my clients listening that have healthy property management companies, but they don't want to do syndication. They're just like, man, that's a whole nother business. If I stay in my lane, I can grow that faster. How do they find syndicates? Like, how do they find people like you? Because you've got a lot of properties connected to you, and they would probably love to chat with somebody like you. Where do you syndicate people hang out? What's the title? What do you guys call? Who runs a syndicate? What are they called? Do they have a special title?
Yeah, great question. Multifamily Syndicator is kind of the name, just Syndicator. We're all over. So I've got a podcast called Multifamily Insights. I interview like-minded individuals. I've been doing that for a long time. We've done our 770 plus episodes. So lots of people, lots of syndicators there. Definitely conferences. So if you look up any multifamily conference in your city, meetups, a lot of meetups in different cities as well. Those are great places to find syndicators. I think the biggest thing though is this: figure out who your avatar is. Because while we're talking about syndicators, ultimately, if you want to scale your property management business, I presume you're trying to scale with folks who are looking for third-party management. And the best option for that, okay, and let me back up. I had one of the guests I had on my podcast some years back, Ashley Wilson, love Ashley. Ashley said something that really changed the way I thought about the business. And she said the best way to find any vendor, is to figure out who relies on that vendor next and ask them for a referral. So if you think about it, if you want a great drywall person, ask a painter. A painter is going to know who's great at drywall because they're going to know who makes their job easy and they can come in and just start painting, versus a drywall guy who maybe doesn't, mud the drywall properly or doesn't sand it down. So they got to do all this extra work before they start their process, right? So a painter is going to know a great drywall guy. And in this case, it's really hard on the property management because you guys are the ones who do the work. But if you are looking for syndicators, okay, well, a syndicator is the person who buys the deal. Well, who sells the deal? A broker. Find brokers. Go to a broker, commercial multifamily broker, and ask them, hey, do you know some groups or do you have properties that you're going to list? Here are the kind of deals we want to do. Now, on the flip side of that, you got to be good at your job, right? You got to sell yourself and share what you do. So if you've got a great track record, a great resume, showcase that, bring that broker through and let them know, hey, we're looking to scale our property management business. Here are the kind of assets that we want to manage. If you come across any of these that you're going to list, would you mind keeping our name out there or referring us or giving us introductions to any of those buyers so that we can throw our hat in the running to manage these properties? That's a phenomenal way to do that. And it allows you to shine and expand your relationships in your core networks and in your core markets.
Brilliant. I think I love Ashley's idea that you shared, the drywall. Yeah. The painters are like, they don't want to be painting over crappy drywall. They're like, this is a mess. Like, this doesn't even look good. And my job now, I'm going to look bad. Yeah. So the brokers know who maybe those best syndicators are. And so they could just go to the brokers and say, hey, who's doing deals like this? Who's got things going on? Like, who could you connect me with?
And on top of that, keep in mind too, like, what are the times when, but think about too, like, when is a property hiring or bringing on a new property manager, right? So it's either a current owner is firing the existing property manager, or the property's being sold, right? So, I mean, if you can get in during that transition phase, that's going to help you tremendously. And even if they're firing their existing property manager, you can think through, okay, how do I work myself and get my name out there? And a lot of times, again, you're going to ask, right? You're going to ask other investors. If I were going through that process, I'm going to call my buddies in the space, right? And say, hey, man, having a hard time with my current PMs, not working out, or we're not hitting our objectives, looking at some other options. Do you have any experience with these guys? What do you know about these guys? Or do you have anybody you could recommend? It's word of mouth, right? So that's what's going to start happening as well. So you kind of have to get out there and network and let folks know who you are, what you do. But you want to be someone who people can say, yeah, these guys are amazing. They only had an 8-unit, but they crushed my 8-unit for me. I'm sure they kill your 25-unit, your 50-unit.
Yeah.
And you've got to start building that rapport and building your reputation in your market.
Nice. This is good advice, my friend. So, okay. So cool. For those that maybe are investors listening to this show, I'd love to hear a little bit about what you do, how you do run your syndication, and how they can, make things more passive if that's what they're looking for.
Yeah, man. So there are lots of different ways to get in. If you are looking to be more passive, high level, here's how it works. Okay. So first and foremost, me and my team, we go out, we look for the deals. We focus on a really tight radius. So we're in Cincinnati. We like Cincinnati, Columbus, Louisville, Kentucky. Really a 2-hour radius of the Cincinnati market is where we focus. And right now, we actually think there's more opportunities locally. So we're really honed in on Cincinnati right now. But we focus on that. Once we find a deal, we reach out to folks in our network. So we have folks in our investor list. Once they're on our list, we kind of have a quick vetting process, and then we can share opportunities with them. Once they see that opportunity, they get a chance to review it. We like to have a webinar where we answer any questions about the deal. I think for new investors, it's a great way to learn because we have a lot of experienced investors who ask very intelligent, thoughtful questions that many first-time investors probably would not even think of. And that's a great way to learn, right? And ultimately, when it comes to this space, it's really about education. It's educating yourself, understanding how you think about risk, how you mitigate risk in your investment choices. And those webinars are a great chance for you to learn about that the first time. Once you've done that, you can go ahead and fill out our official paperwork with our SEC documents. And then once you're through there, you can make the investment. But the first thing is just to get on our list. You can have access to the deals. And before you do that, we've actually put together a guide that can help people because I've found that when I have these calls, people don't ask great questions. Sometimes they do, but I want to make sure that you are informed and well educated because this is a big investment. This is not a $5.99 thing. And if it doesn't work out, okay, well, I just wasted $6. No, we're asking you to make a pretty large investment, whether it's with us or with others. If that's what you're looking to do, I want to make sure you're well informed. So we put together a guide. It's 7 questions you must ask before investing in apartments. You can get that on our website. It's casmoncapital.com/7 questions, but it gets into questions around the market itself, the operating team, what you should be looking for, the deal, what is the story of this property, what's the business plan, and it helps you identify different levels of risk because the reality is anything can work, but you want to mitigate risk as much as possible, particularly when you're a passive investor, because you are basically saying, I'm trusting these people to find the right deal and execute. And you want to make sure that you are finding and identifying the right individuals who have a proven track record doing the thing that they are asking to do. When I hear about people losing money in real estate, at least 50, if not 70% of the time, it is someone doing something for the first time. Either it's the first time in the market, first time doing this kind of deal, first time doing this kind of business plan. And I can't tell you how frustrating it is because it's a big red flag. And it's not to say that they can't do it and can't have success, but if it's your first time, I want to see how you're mitigating that, right? You want to partner with someone who does have the experience. There are a lot of things that you can do to put the odds in your favor. And when you're a passive investor, it is not your job to hope. Your job is to analyze the information in front of you and make an informed decision. So this guide can help you do that.
Perfect. I appreciate that. So for those listening, if you've felt stuck or stagnant or you want to take your property management business to the next level, reach out to us. You can get to us at DoorGrow.com for free training on how to get unlimited leads for free. Just text the word leads to 512-648-4608. Also, join our free Facebook community just for property management business owners at the DoorGrow. Just go to DoorGrowClub.com. That'll take you to it. And if you want tips, tricks, ideas to learn about our offers, subscribe to our newsletter by going to DoorGrow.com/subscribe. And if you, just like John said, found this a little bit helpful, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review. We'd really appreciate it. And yeah, reach out. I hear it all the time. I've been listening to your show for an hour. For a year. I'm a big fan. And I'm like, cool. You ready to do something? They're like, finally, yeah. All right. So John, thanks for being here on The Door Show.
Absolutely, Jason. Hey, thanks for having me, and good luck to all of your listeners. Take that next step, man. Grow your doors.
Awesome. Until next time, everybody, remember the slowest path to growth is to do it alone. So let's grow together. Bye, everyone.